everyone, and thank you for participating to this session of Future Leaders Forum, which is dedicated to impact investing. So I just present a little bit myself. I am Angelica, and I am an analyst at Total Specific Solution, one of leading European company in vertical market software. I graduated from Bocconi in 2020, and also I had some experience in the investment banking sector. We have the pleasure today to have as a guest speaker Patrick Goodman, one of the co-founders of Impact Investing, which is one of the leading impact finance specialists providing advisory and also third-party fund management services since 2007, and also counting more than 15 members. Patrick has also a long-lasting experience in establishing, development, and designing impact funds and finance blended vehicles, and also having a previous background in the investment banking sector, having worked for banks such as JP Morgan or Citibanks. So before starting the session, I just would like to make you know that the session will be recorded, and if you have any question during the speaking, you can write it in the chat box, and we will go through them or during or at the end of the session. So thank you again, Patrick. And first of all, I just would like to know which is the difference between sustainable and impact investing. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelica, and well, thanks for this invitation. It's great to be able to share some of our views about the overall consulting business in which we're in, and something which is dear to our hearts, sustainable and impact investing. Let me, as an introduction, allow me to share my screen, and it worked before, so hopefully it works now also. Do you see the screen? This is, and I won't bore you with slides. They're just 2 or 3 slides, as a support to this presentation. Impact investing is really part of the overall spectrum of investing. And you see here from the left side, traditional investing, to the right side, philanthropy. Traditional investing, we know all about. It's basically shareholder return first, with no aspiration to meet any social, environmental impact or any ESG considerations, E, environmental, S, social, G, governance aspirations. Responsible investing is going a bit into the direction of taking into account ESG criteria, and sustainable investing is really about investing essentially in listed securities with an ESG component. So it does take into consideration some social and some environmental aspects, some governance aspects, whereas impact investing are investments which have the intention to create a positive social environmental impact alongside financial returns. So all these terms, I would say, are important, and let me take you through this aspect. And all these terms are really important when considering impact investing. The first is the intentionality. The investments are made with the intention of creating a positive social or environmental impact. It's not good enough to analyze after the fact, what does my investment have as an impact? It's really when you create either your fund or your project, which impact am I seeking? Some will want to have a social impact, others environmental impact, and even on the environmental side, is it to get carbon credits? Is it to have an impact on the ecosystem overall? Is it to invest in renewable energy, to participate to energy efficiencies, etc.? There are many different projects or impacts which you can aim for. And what's really key, and you have here the sign of the SDGs below that, and really what's key is what sustainable development goals are you aiming for? And here again, there's no good or bad. Everybody has its own goals, For example, microfinance funds, so funds investing in microfinance or lending to micro entrepreneurs, either directly or through financial institutions, may have no poverty as a goal, may have gender equality as a goal, may have decent work and economic growth as a goal. Other funds such as climate funds may have 13 climate action as a goal, etc. So really, impact funds all should have these SDGs as an objective, as an aspiration in one form or the other. If I go back to what constitutes impact investment, so the intentionality. The second aspect is really creating a strategy. How do you get to this impact? And the third one is actually measuring and managing and measuring. You can't manage if you can't measure. So it's all about metrics. That's one of the criticisms which traditional finance sometimes makes about impact. Oh, it costs to do all this analysis. Well, yes, it does cost to some extent if you want to be able to measure what impact you have. It's no longer good enough just to say, oh, because I'm doing microfinance or because I'm investing in renewable energy, it's good enough. Now, some may be perfectly happy with just the idea of providing microfinance funding, but other investors may actually want to know what impact does it have? What impact does it have on the empowerment of women, for example? It's not just good enough to say, there are 80% women borrowers in my funds, but what's the quality of these investments which are made? So this is just to give you a very high level view of what impact investing is all about. And our company Innpact has been involved in impact investing. It wasn't known as such right at the beginning, although the name of our company Innpact was a bit of a play on impact investing, and INN being for innovative. But that's what really we are there for. We're purely dedicated to impact investing and not just responsible or sustainable or ESG investing.
Patrick, you've talked about goals. So you set goals, and I think that, of course, they are very achieving, very challenging. But I would like to know what is the role of consulting and how in reflecting these clients' goals and values.
Yeah, very important question, because sometimes consultants may not be needed in the sense that the promoter of the project may have all the ideas and how to get about it, but we've seen, and that's how I get to know Gagana at the time, is you need consultants to be able to help out in the various steps of the development of your impact project. One of the very first steps when you have an impact project is to be able to analyze the gap. What's the missing gap in the market? What's the requirement of the market? Is there the need of a specific financing? And if I take the example of a fund we helped launch, was a fund investing in microfinance in Africa, what's the gap? Is the market covered by the local actors? Is it covered by the development finance institutions? Is it covered by other institutions? And we discovered, with the help of those consultants at the time, that there was a gap. Now, once there is a gap, is there a space for the investments to be made? Because having a structure investing and analyzing and measuring the impact on the ground has a certain cost. And is there the space to create this product? And so I think it's very important to have consultants on the ground, as well as structuring consultants, to be able to identify where there is a need and where a role can be played. And more, I think consultants, traditional consultants, or ourselves, more specialist consultants, are bringing this knowledge and this expertise in impact investing, and be able to identify what impact is created or is meant to be created through these projects. So it's very important that all kinds of consultants gear themselves up to responding not just to the needs of the investees, the needs of the people on the ground, but also to the challenges of our society. And as we see, one of the biggest challenges is energetic independence. And I think it's key that consultants help in developing those solutions, either directly or through funds or through holding companies, to go into that direction. So not just for the environment, but also for our independence, as we see with the situation in Ukraine.
So of course, you're talking about challenges that usually comes within opportunities, and which are the main opportunities you can see in the market in this sense?
Well, the clear opportunities are certainly in climate action, and talked about, in energetic independence is one aspect, investing in renewables around the world, whether it's in Europe or elsewhere, whether it's in solar or wind energy, but also in investing in the biodiversity. I think we now realize we're just at least in Europe, we're at the end of this crisis, this Corona crisis. And what we've discovered, it's one of the reasons of this crisis is also because the habitat, the natural habitat of animals and various species is being reduced. So deforestation is a real issue. And, it has an impact, not just on the carbon absorption capacity of these forests, but also on the natural habitat of these forests. And by having a close interaction between some species and humankind, we're increasing the risk of having further pandemics. So it's not just a question of being nice to the animals living in these forests. It's a real question of survival of I think humanity. So there are so many different fronts where we can have and must have an impact on these different levels. And I think it's up to each and every sponsor or consultant to choose its chosen actions. And there's plenty of space, I think, for everybody, plenty of opportunities. And the good news is that investors are really keen to invest in these themes, whether we're talking about private individuals, but even more importantly, institutional investors, pension funds, insurance companies especially realize that they collectively need to invest in climate action just purely from a financial point of view. Now, of course, the delicate aspect about climate action is that each insurance company doesn't see the immediate impact of its investments. What difference does it make, even if a very large institution invests or not in fossil fuels? But I think people are realizing that on an overall basis, it has a definite impact. So I think consultants must also be made increasingly aware that they have an impact in the way they advise their clients, and to be able to show clients, what is the impact of the decisions and their investments.
So are you noting that now there is more and more concern about this issue, and it is more concern, more aware in all aspects? Absolutely.
I think the technical knowledge is there. The skills are there from a technical point of view. I think what we need now is a greater conscious of what needs to be done. And also to realize that this greater consciousness, which would lead to further investments in impact assets, in impact projects, actually have a financial benefit. If we're talking just about fossil fuels, I fully realize that when you're an insurance company or any institutional investor, you've got to balance the social environmental impact with your financial returns. And admittedly, stocks of some fossil fuel companies have gone up tremendously over the recent past because of the crisis or the war in Ukraine. Let's call it what it is. It's a war. So I could fully understand institutional investors saying, well, I can't afford not to invest in fossil fuels because I've got an index to track. Now, the reality is, if those institutions don't dramatically change their way of operating and heavily invest in impact energy and in climate, in solar energy and wind farms or biogas, their stock value will go down at some point. Now the question is when. But some investors are taking the bold decision to divest from fossil fuel companies despite the upside financial potential, just because they feel it's the right thing to do and to build for the future. And this movement is gaining momentum. And I think it's, and I see it, I mean, we see it in our dealings with many traditional consultants that increasingly are gearing their clients towards, either putting in more impact or sustainable aspects in their investments, or totally going towards, really, impact funds. And for example, the regulation is going to that direction. The SFDR, the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, is going to that direction. So now, if I can talk from the funds perspective, you have three types of funds with regards to sustainability. You have Article 9, Article 8 funds. The Article 9 funds are those which attempt to ensure that most of their assets reach some form of social or sustainable or environmental goal. Article 8 funds is that some of their assets reach those goals. So I would say it's a stepping stone to Article 9. And Article 6 are all the other funds. Now, over the recent past, most of the funds which have been created are Article 8 or Article 9 funds, which shows that there is this interest from these investors in investing in a responsible way. Of course, we have to ensure, just one last thing, we have to ensure that we don't have greenwashing in the process, because we know that some of these large investment banks have extremely efficient marketing teams which present one aspect, but then we must ensure through other types of consultants maybe, that what they're investing in is truly has a social and environmental goal. And that's going to be the next challenge. So I think I really encourage consultants around the world to also train themselves, gain expertise into this field, because this kind of expertise and consciousness, I would say, is already, but will be increasingly become in high demand.
Also, referring to the fact you're talking about regulation and also many other technical aspects, I also would like to mention an important fact about Innpact, which is the first Luxembourg company to obtain a B Corp certification. Yep. And also, I would like to remind all the guests that they have to feel free to write in the box chat any question if they have. Also, I just remind them.
Yes. Thank you for mentioning it. At the time, we were looking for a label, a certification, which would not just comfort us that we were a social company, but which would be a governance tool for us to do better. And we found this B Corp certification, which comes as very often from the US, came through the UK, the Netherlands, and now it's coming across Europe and around the world. I think there are about 3,000 B Corps around the world. And this certification process covers a wide range of aspects, from what you do as a business, how you do it, what's your governance, clients, policies and procedures, and it gets stricter year by year. So we went through the certification process back in 2015. We got our certification in 2015. Since then, we've been recertified in 2017, and we're now undergoing our next certification. We are fortunate to be not best of the world, but best for the world, which is the way they put it, which I like it very much, in a number of items, which means that we go a step further than just being a normal B Corp. And we've used it as a tool. We realized at the time through this certification that we were weak on governance, for example. Weak on governance because the company was owned by Arnaud Gillin and myself as partners, and we were taking all the decisions in a way. We were, the board. And since then, we've decided to open up our capital. We now have 20 other shareholders of the company. We've decided to have an independent board member, the ex-CFO of the Triodos Bank, which was a purely responsible and which is a sustainable bank in the Netherlands, and he retired. And we're privileged to have him with such a great, sustainable, responsible experience as an independent director. We've opened up our management committee, and all this not just to score points on the B Corp ladder, but really to ensure that we have people in the company, participate more to what we're doing. And here again, I would invite consultants and there are consultants actually consulting on the B Corp methodology, the B Corp process. It's not complicated, but it's lengthy because it goes really to the depth of what makes a responsible company. For example, many of you may know Emmanuel Faber, who used to be the CFO of Danone. He was instrumental in transforming Danone into Société à Impact Social in France, so having a social structure, a legal social structure, and ensuring that some of the B Corps some of the Danone companies became B Corps. Now, not the whole group is a B Corp, but there are a number of companies. Of course, you don't transform an institution like Danone into a B Corp from one day to the next, but it shows the way that things can be done, even in our traditional world where profit comes first. Because people realize also that by putting social aspects and by putting environmental aspects at the forefront, there is a way to change the world. And if I may, I'm French, in addition to being English, but I'm French, and as you may know, we just had the French elections. And no, we don't have 41% of the population adhering to a thesis of the extreme right. No, we have 41% of the population which is either angry or which is at a loss, which are having difficulties meeting ends. We talk about in French, la fin du mois or la fin du monde. And we shouldn't have to choose between the two, between the environmental aspect and the social aspect. That's why these social and environmental aspects need to go hand in hand in ensuring that the world we live in is a better world. And if anything, to abort, civil unrest, which can come, when a time when people are angry at, the top people taking the largest share of the cake. There may be civil unrest, and there is. There was the Gilets jaunes, which were interrupted by the pandemic in France. But overall, these injustices and these aspects related to the environment have financial implications, and I think it's important to realize that that in order to be able to transform the world gradually, and that's where, here again, I really invite consultants to widen their horizon in developing this kind of expertise, because it is in high demand. And we are 50 today because we do have this expertise. We're growing it. We're growing, strongly. But I think there's plenty of space. There's plenty of space in this business.
We have an interesting question that is quite related to this from Yelwa. That's asking that how does one go about impact risk assessment, particularly post-COVID-19, in terms of future investment as we venture into digitalization?
Yeah, absolutely. It's linked to what I was saying initially. It's not just for the good of people and for the environment. All this is having a financial impact. And that's where the risk management comes in very clearly. What is the risk when you have a fund or have a venture or have a company? You identify the risks of your business, and that's where having an adequate risk management tool and risk management capability is really important. And when you're an institutional investor, like an insurance company or a reinsurance company, and when you look at what is your risk of the client of the changes to the climate, and so this is definitely putting the very existence of your company at the core of what's happening. And there are various aspects. When you deal with climate action, there are two essential directions where you can invest in. It's either in client mitigation or in client adaptation. Client mitigation is ensuring that the greenhouse gas emissions actually decrease, that there is more investments made in renewable energies, for example. Adaptation is how do you adapt this changing environment? So the two are important, and you need to, based on your risk, you need to be able to determine what action you need to take as a company. And there are two aspects to that: is what impact does your business have on climate? But then the other aspect is, what impact does climate have on your business? If you are a nuclear plant, and I'm not going to go to the debate as to whether or not nuclear is good or bad, but if you have a nuclear plant and you're next to the ocean, and whether you're in Japan or in France, in Bordeaux, we were very close to a Fukushima incident a few years ago. We haven't really heard much about it, but just because it was close to the ocean, the generators and everything were flooded with water. So there are risks on both sides, and that's the risk management of what funds need to do, companies to do, to be able to take the appropriate action.
And have there been example, for example, in terms of case study that you had the opportunity to have where you had to take the situation hands-on, and you need to do something like that?
Yeah, well, I gave the example earlier of this fund, which is called RECMIFA, which is a fund investing in sub-Saharan Africa, where there was indeed a demand. One recent fund which we have as a client, which is called Livelihoods. It's a fund investing in biodiversity, in ecosystems around the world, and the investors, which are traditional French investors, Danone is in there. There are some luxury goods companies which are in there. They don't actually get a financial return out of it, so they invest in the fund. What they get out of it are carbon credits. So I think it's important also to show that based on where you stand on the actual space, is you can invest in different ways. You don't necessarily have to get a financial return. You can get other return in the form of carbon credits.
And also we have another interesting question from Mahmoud. How can we incorporate ESG issues in our consultancy duties? And are there globally standardized points in this respect so we can follow our duties?
There are a number of standards which are gradually appearing, whether it's the OPIM standards, whether there are Ceres standards, there are the 2X challenge, which are aiming at the empowerment of women. So there are a number of standards which are being created. And then I would say it's up to each consulting company to identify how it can make its current business evolve, so that it can gradually, learn I would say the tricks, not the tricks, but the fundamentals of impact investing and sustainable investing. And there are a lot of traditional investors which are kind of lost in this field. Just a very question you asked at the beginning, Angelica, is, what's the difference between sustainable investing and impact investing? And I think that's where the everyone, but the consulting firms especially, need to develop their own skills to be able to develop the expertise which they feel comfortable with. And if they don't do it yet, is allowing a gradual transition to that expertise.
And then also other question from Tudors. What do you consider the minimum or maximum size of a private equity impact fund supported by Innpact? And what principle does Innpact use in order to define the pricing of its four services in terms of strategy, constructing, AFM, management and investment services? And finally, why would a PE impact fund domicile in Mauritius instead of Luxembourg?
Well, those are very detailed questions, which will probably warrant another separate discussion. But I can very quickly answer. I mean, it is one of the challenge of the impact investment funds. They tend to be small because it's maybe a more difficult business than investing in liquid bonds and equities. And that is the challenge. There are a number of impact funds which we support, which are around the 20 to 30 million. Clearly, a fund like this is not sustainable in the long run. So the absolute minimum size, in my view, after 5 years should be 50 million. And even larger is ideal. And the reason also is that those with the deep pockets to invest are the institutional investors. Institutional investors will typically say, because of their size and because of their processes, investment processes, they will want to invest, minimum 20 million in, for example, in a debt fund, or 30 million in a debt fund, but they also want diversification criteria. So they will say, oh, I want to invest 20 million, but by the way, I don't want to represent more than 20% of the liability of the fund, which means that the fund has to reach at least 100 million. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, I fully realize. PGGM, for example, as very important Dutch pension fund, issued a statement 3 or 4 years ago saying that they would like to invest 20 billion euros in impact investing. And on the other hand, you had plenty of impact fund managers saying, well, this is a joke. I've been asking for funding for the last 5 years. I'm not getting it in any size. That's the reason is there's a mismatch. The impact investment fund on the one hand is 20 to 30 million. And the other one is saying on the other side, I want to invest this amount, but it needs to represent no more than 20%. But the impact field is moving into this direction gradually. You have more and more actors, traditional actors, as well as first-time or second-time fund managers, which are being launched, which actually help in the process. And for example, an initiative which we suggested to the Luxembourg government, which is called the ICFA, the International Climate Finance Accelerator, which is an incubator of climate finance funds in Luxembourg. So the Luxembourg government dedicates funding to this initiative. There's a kind of mini competition going on as to who will get the support from the Luxembourg government. Each 6 months, there are 4 projects which are selected for support, and there's a whole networking going on. The participants to this process are extremely happy, if only for the network it creates. You can talk to other impact funds. What are your challenges? What are you doing about placement? What are you doing about determining which impact targets you seek? How do you measure them? What methodologies do you use? Do you use IRIS? Do you use other methodologies? So it creates a whole ecosystem of small to medium, which hopefully will become medium to large fund managers in the impact ecosystem. And as far as Luxembourg and Mauritius, just very quickly, it really depends on where your investors are. It's investors. Yes, if you invest in equity, you may want to look into double taxation treaties in Mauritius. But working in impact, I always have an issue with double taxation treaties, because that means that the countries are not getting the tax revenues. So I think we have to be careful with how you play with double taxation treaties. There is a responsibility in paying fair taxes, I strongly believe. So I don't know whether I fully answered the question, but I invite the person to go on our website and to reach out to me maybe after. I don't want to hold hostage everybody to detailed business discussions, but very happy to do so.
Thank you so much. So I see that there is Lydia that has his hand on. So I don't know if you want to write your question in the chat box or just to keep track of that. Thank you.
I think I want to speak because it's too long to write.
Okay, okay.
Because my question is too long. I want to ask, thanks Patrick for sharing. I want to ask, as ESG concerns take center stage in the post-pandemic world, how should corporate boards assess how they organize themselves and their executives to govern the identification, management, and reporting ESG issues to stakeholders? Like, for instance, a formation of a board-level sustainability committee with accountability for the overall sustainability strategy and performance of the business. The second would be the appointment of a CSO, Chief Sustainability Officer, or equivalent. A 2021 global survey by Deloitte and the Institute of International Finance projected the emergence of a role of CSO over the next 2 years for management of risk.
Yes.
What is your recommendation?
Sorry, have you finished your question?
Another question, but one question at a time.
Okay. This is extremely important because we're shifting from, what is the responsibility of directors? We're shifting from maximization of profit and maximization of shareholder value to optimization of shareholder value, considering environmental and social aspects, because those aspects will have an impact on the financing. And I've given a number of times either lectures or courses to directors, and I told them it is your responsibility to ask the right questions to your management and the management of the companies for which, or the funds for which you are directors. You're not there to provide all the answers, but you're there to ask the right questions. If you do not put sustainability on the agenda of these companies, you will be held responsible for having taken no action or having taken too little action in the face of what is happening. And this is really about director responsibility. Now, we're not seeing it yet, but it is coming at the level of the boards to have that responsibility. And sometimes I'm really surprised that, sometimes it's the first time that some directors hear about this sustainability responsibility, and they're kind of all surprised, but it is coming. And so if only to protect yourself, I'm joking, of course, you need to put this on the agenda of the board meetings, and having a CSO alongside a CIO or CFO, and of course the CEO, is of course of vital importance to the very existence of these companies, and also for the long run. And coming back again on even having a financial impact. We don't know what the future world will look like in addressing these responsibilities. Will there be fines? Will there be disinterest from shareholders, from investors? Stock price will go down. Now, I'm sorry to mention the name of the company, but look at Deutsche Bank. I mean, the share price of Deutsche Bank has gone down by, and last time I looked was 98%. I don't know where it is today, just because of the way it was managing its overall businesses. investment banks need to incorporate sustainability and impact aspects in the way they manage their business. So I think it is of vital importance that to ensure that this consciousness that things need to change, and I'm not talking about a crazy change. I think it's gradually adapting. If everybody can do some effort, Danone is doing it. Of course, Danone is being criticized by the hard green movement by not doing enough. Of course, it's a multinational company, but it's moving in the right direction.
We have another question from Lydia. What is the role of philanthropy in the carbon creating ecosystem?
Philanthropy is excessively important in areas where there can't be, or it is difficult to have a financial return. So undoubtedly, in some areas, philanthropy is needed to invest in education, to invest in some social services. I would insist that philanthropy is used as a first loss funding for some impact initiatives. The greatest difficulty of impact investing is bringing in investors to the field because they feel it's too risky. And donors and NGOs and foundations, in my view, are sometimes schizophrenic, in the sense they will invest in a traditional way with their endowment, creating the difficulties which their other arm, which is taking care of doing good, of spending the money, on the other side. I would really invite those foundations, rather than giving away the money or giving away all the money, is that some pot is reserved between the endowment and the donation to incentivize investors to invest more in impact investing. As we know, philanthropy is a certain minus 100% return. Even if this first loss investment brings a loss of 50%, there's still the other 50% left. But more importantly, through its leverage, it has incentivized investors for maybe up to 10 times multiple to invest in this sector, whether it's ecosystems, climate finance, microfinance, SME finance, etc. All these impact themes where investment is greatly needed. And different risk profiles. There's equity risk profile, debt risk profile, guarantees. There's a whole series of profiles available. So I would really incentivize philanthropists to open up to investing in blended finance structures.
Yes, we have one from Tudors. Does Innpact provide support in order to manage FX risk, similar or in cooperation to work with TCX?
Yeah, TCX. Yeah, TCX is one of our partners. So we work with TCX on a number of funds, and we do offer also risk management capabilities for funds. So this is indeed something we do, and maybe something I can just very slightly elaborate on is not with TCX, but with its mother company, which is called Cardano, and together with a French company called Octobre, we are putting in place a solution together with FMO, the Dutch development agency, together with DEG, the German Development Bank, and together with Proparco, and we've applied to receive funding from the European Commission to find a solution to the illiquidity of impact investment funds or impact investments. And that's one of the key issues, is impact investments are not liquid typically, because they invest in by the nature in illiquid instruments, providing a long-term loan or a subordinated loan to a solar or wind SPV. And so the aim is to create some form of liquidity I won't go into the technical details, but we feel that the ecosystem needs a liquidity solution like this. And in the same way that TCX has answered a foreign exchange issue, and just in a nutshell, to say what TCX is all about is actually providing hedging and exchange of currencies which are not readily served by the Citibanks, Deutsche Banks, Goldman Sachs of this world, because simply the market is not big enough. So TCX makes market in all necessary currencies around the world. It started with microfinance, but now it covers the whole range of impact finance opportunities. And so the same way as TCX was created for the market, the intention with the creation of this October facility is to respond to a need of the market. So yes, and the aim is not just to work on individual deals, but also to work on industry solutions to be able to ensure that the impact ecosystem continues to grow. Because there are challenges, and one of the challenges, yes, is liquidity. Another one which was mentioned is the size, is profitability. So that's what we're aiming to do at our own scale.
Finally, the last question from Lydia, what are the opportunities and challenges of nature-based solution? That is connected with what also we would say a little bit in the beginning.
A lot to be said. I don't know whether I'm going to answer exactly your question, but when you talk about nature-based solution, I immediately come to think about the importance of connection to nature. And this is clear, and we see it also in some of the events which we organize, which we tend to do more and more in nature. And to feel this connection to nature and to the world. And by having this greater connection to nature, we also realize how important it is to be able to connect to others. And coming back more on a business perspective, I think it's important indeed to have those connections to the nature through also the development of ecosystems, which have an impact on the social aspects. When we develop ecosystems in Senegal, for example, we allow communities to have a better life. We're now supporting a fund for which with the AFM, which develops tourism in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, it is important to be able to work on nature in order to be able to support the local communities. And I very much favor people staying where they are in their social environment. I'm not saying I'm against immigration, quite to the contrary. Our Western world, developed world, won't survive without immigration. But we should do the most we can to ensure that people stay within their communities. And that means developing those nature-based solutions to ensure that they can stay and in their natural habitat, in their natural environment. And impact investing is all about that also, combining environmental aspects with social aspects. Maybe just one last word about the role of consultants in this. And I think it's really important that, you're around the table and those who will listen to the video later on, really think about how you can help in the process by developing your expertise, whether you work for a traditional consultant or anyone else, really being able to see how you can, develop your knowledge to be able to help others to go into that direction. And there are a wide array of consultants, and there is really a role to play for consultants in this direction. And I'm available also outside if people want to have individual discussions, and we don't need to talk about business. Just talking about one of our values is partnership, and with the African motto, together we go further. So our aim is really to support the development of these initiatives, and we don't need to. We have no clock ticking when we talk. We just aim to share our passion for impact.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to all.